Hello, I'm Charlie Brooker and you're watching Newswipe, a programme all about what's been occurring, such as this. Emotional scenes on the Andrew Marr show as Ma insists on bringing up Iraq again. Why won't everyone just leave Alistair Cameron alone? John Terry scandal. Sky capture impressive display of psychic ventriloquism.
Lots of other people have come out and said lots of things about my private life, many of which are totally untrue and very hurtful.
Vanessa Perencel speaking through Max Clifford there.
And staggering statistics show widespread of dementia.
And that's what makes this such a big issue. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
But we start here.
Have you noticed politicians don't seem human anymore?
Look at them, politicians. They're just weird. Not like us at all. Look, here's a normal person, and here's David Miliband. See? It's just not right.
If there's anything weirder than a mere politician, it's an ex-Prime Minister.
Ex-PMs are regarded with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for unexpected visitors from space. For instance, recently the news picked over several fascinating facts regarding the legacy of Empress Margaret from the planet Thatchalos. According to BBC analysts, she used to absorb an unusual quantity of eggs.
She had the same every day. Grapefruit, 1 or 2 eggs, black coffee or clear tea. Lunch, 2 eggs, grapefruit. Dinner, 2 eggs. Combination salad, 1 piece of dry toast, grapefruit and coffee. So in that one day, 6 eggs. Or 6 or 7 eggs in a day.
Meanwhile, ITN took a fascinated and forensic look at some of the detritus she left behind following her stay on the mothership.
What I've got here, I think, is the one item that is perhaps most associated with Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, well, that rules out a human heart.
Indeed, rather than a human heart, it's her handbag, which Libby Viner will now pick over in minute detail.
So what exactly was in Mrs Thatcher's famous handbag? Well, many of the items are quite ordinary. For example, the former Prime Minister's lipstick.
She had lips?
Recently, there was another lipped alien visitation to report as Tony Blair geared up to face the Chilcot inquiry.
The news skillfully built this up to be a whopping great deal on the one hand, while simultaneously helping to manage expectations about the chances of him actually giving anything away on the other.
Channel 4 News attempted to confuse its beleaguered viewers to death by staging an intense alternate dramatisation of Blair's appearance before it had even occurred, using a panel of experts and an actor who was only allowed to answer their questions using words Blair himself had used in interviews and speeches.
It was like he was taking part in a mental episode of Mastermind in which his specialist subject was denying a war crime without giggling.
Mr. Blair, immediately after your pre-war meeting with President Bush at Camp David, the President famously told Alistair Campbell that you had real balls.
Of course, for the purposes of this reconstruction, his real balls are being portrayed by an actor.
Come the dawn of Blair's appearance, the stage was set for the not-quite-a-trial of the century, and furious protesters gathered outside.
There weren't as many as the news had been anticipating, but the ones that were there were entertainingly feisty.
We're going to have a police state, at least organise it properly!
Fittingly, for an inquiry into how the Iraq situation got so buggered, Blair gave the protesters the slip by sliding up the back entrance, thereby showing more cunning than was evident during the entire aftermath of the invasion. Anyway, soon the questioners were in place, the atmosphere was electric. As he sat down and reached for a bottle of water, Blair's hands quivered so much he shook all the blood off them.
And then the first question was asked.
Unfortunately we're not allowed to show you actual footage from the Chilcot inquiry because broadcasters aren't allowed to use any of it for the purposes of satire or entertainment, presumably because there's nothing satirical or entertaining about it. But still, don't despair. Using the power of fictional reconstruction, we can show you what millions wanted Blair to say.
And now we return live to the Chilcot inquiry where Tony Blair is about to begin giving evidence.
My name is Anthony B. Lyer. You know, I'm a war criminal. I'm a shit, you know. I misled the House. I invaded Iraq to impress George Bush. I orchestrated 9/11, 7/7, the credit crunch, and global warming with my bare hands. I f***ed your granddaughter. I shot the sheriff. I also shot the deputy, and I made it look like suicide.
Still, even though he didn't actually say any of that, Blair didn't seem to win over any of his critics with what he did actually say. In fact, it seemed no one was convinced by his performance. I say no one. He did have one vocal cheerleader who turned up for a cosy daytime chat on the daily politics.
I've always been deeply suspicious of received wisdom. You get up close to it, it can have a distinctly fishy smell.
A bit like a yeast infection.
To accuse a serving Prime Minister of lying to Parliament, to the world, about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction is an incredibly serious allegation. I don't believe it for one split second.
Oh, well, that's that settled.
Right up until the German V weapons began to drop on London and the southeast in 1944, the British government, led by Churchill, didn't believe in the existence of those weapons. You didn't see Churchill hauled up before an inquiry in 1946 or 47 or 48. They accepted that it was a genuine mistake.
This isn't so much an argument as a series of flaws held together with consonants.
It's also important to remember that governments do use spin to take their countries to war. The 45-minute claim was a classic example of spin. But look back at some of Margaret Thatcher's speeches that took us into the Falklands War. Spin City.
Jesus Christ, what are you going to do next? Question the nature of knowledge itself?
I'm always astonished at the blunt certainty with which some people say that the war was illegal. How can they really know? International law is incredibly complicated. But at the end of the day, if the Attorney General, however many times he may have changed his mind, comes down on the side of legality and tells the Prime Minister that, who's to argue?
Ladies and gentlemen, the death of satire.
When a former Prime Minister needs a former daytime host to defend him, it's fair to say the balance of power between politicians and TV is all out of whack. Not that MPs need to be accused of war crimes to look bad. They all look bad on the box.
There's a huge disconnect between them and us, which isn't helped by things like the expenses scandal.
Every time you see a politician on TV, they're being treated with withering contempt.
I am never going to satisfy you folks at all. I am never going to be able to say that because I am an MP and therefore guilty.
MPs are now so detached from the rest of us, we'll even watch harrowing reality programmes where they're forced to mix with regular people for entertainment. Yes, it's fair to say that television has reduced MPs to blubbing on the lawn. But things used to be the other way round. In the early days of broadcasting, television kowtowed to politicians with sickening deference.
Well now, Mr. Eden, with your very considerable experience of foreign affairs, it's quite obvious that I should start by asking you something about the international situation today, or perhaps you would prefer to talk about home. Which shall it be?
Consequently, politicians didn't have much respect for television.
Anything else you care to say about the company then? No.
That changed when perky young upstart ITN arrived and their budding firebrand, Robin Day, made waves by confronting Macmillan.
Is it correct, as reported in one paper, that he would like, in fact, to give up the job of Foreign Secretary?
Not at all, except in the sense that everybody would like to give up these appalling burdens which we try and carry.
That might not look like a big deal now, but it was at the time. Now the gloves were off and politicians found themselves increasingly challenged on the box.
To try and turn it into a party issue is really beyond belief contemptible.
Do you feel that those who've spoken out, the bishops, the Times and so on, have tried to turn it into a party issue?
I think you have.
Thank you, Lord Hill.
MPs had to learn the hard way that on TV what you said wasn't as important as the impression you left, and they became more image conscious as a result. For instance, after Harold Wilson realised he often made unconsciously menacing actions with his fist, he adopted his trademark pipe, which simultaneously kept his hands occupied and made him appear cosy. Faced with slicker opponents, the interviewers were forced to up their game. Robin Day unsettled them by becoming even more irritating.
Do you think that...
No, Robin, leave it. No, leave it.
I haven't started yet.
Well, if you haven't started, then I beg of you not to start and turn to something else.
I was about to.
You are really? You promise?
I was about, yes.
Okay, all right.
If the market minority in the Parliament decide to vote...
You know, I believe there's going to be the same questions raised in a different way.
And sometimes he was downright rude.
Why should the public on this issue, as regards the future of the Royal Navy, believe you, a transient, here today, and if I may say so, gone tomorrow politician, rather than a senior officer of many years ago?
I'm fed up with this interview.
Faced with increasingly blunt questions, politicians became more evasive.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I was not entitled to instruct Derek Lewis.
And did you threaten to overrule him?
The truth of the matter is,
I did not to overrule him.
I did not overrule Derek.
I note you're not answering the question whether you threatened to overrule him.
The important aspect.
I'm sorry. It's a quite straight yes or no.
Question and I will give you an answer.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I discussed this matter with Derek Lewis.
And faced with increasingly evasive answers, the interviewers became increasingly invasive.
A lot of people in this country use prescription painkillers and pills to help them get through. Are you one of those people?
No.
And the exchanges as a whole became more uncomfortable.
Watching some of today's political interviews is a bit like eavesdropping on a couple trapped in a loveless marriage, bickering on their way home from a shit dinner party with their equally miserable friends.
Briefly, if you want to ask about the second marriage allowance, you're very welcome to do so. The answer's very simple. You want to go?
What?
Well, yes or no? I mean, yeah.
Sorry?
Do you want to ask the question?
Yes.
Please, go ahead.
The one chance politicians get to speak directly to the viewer without being drawn into a conversation about just how big an arsehole they are comes in the form of the party political broadcast.
Trouble is, as soon as they start making adverts for themselves, they quickly prove they're not the best or most subtle programme makers. Here, for instance, we see Labour gently trying to create a link in the voters' mind between Tory-approved nuclear missiles and soft pink, easily burnt to death babies.
If there's another world war, it'll be nuclear. There'll be no winners and no one will survive.
It will never happen.
But sod nuclear war, the Tories brought us something even more frightening, the nuclear winter of '79.
Do you remember what it was like before the last election? The rubbish piled high in the streets.
Yes, oh, it really stank.
Ambulances left unmanned. The dead unburied.
Yeah, well, they weren't going anywhere.
Cancer patients sent home from hospital.
Shit, they've nicked an unmanned ambulance. Bloody cancer patients. Oh.
And when archive footage won't suffice, they try and scare us with terrifying metaphorical visions of the future under the opposition.
Did you or did you not want better schooling for your children?
Guilty. And on the few occasions they're not being all sledgehammer and art house, they still come across as arseholes. Without interviewers holding them to account, politicians can easily seem stuffy or complacent.
I think we can be fairly satisfied the way things have gone lately, don't you, Ram?
Yes, well, we've got through our programme very well, and I've just come from the House, and we're right up to date.
Or weird and creepy.
We believe in Britain. We're all in this together. Good luck to you all, and good night.
Or bolshy and needy.
Stand firm. Don't be swayed. Give us a chance.
Or young and sexy.
Neil Kinnock's greatest asset is his youth.
Or grey and boring. Or Scottish and boring and sitting at a desk.
Good evening. Good God, it's footage of Gordon Brown in the womb.
You'd be better off with Labour.
And when they're not telling you you're better off with Labour, they're telling you the economic situation is getting better more quickly than anybody thought this time last year.
There's no doubt that the economic situation is getting better, and it's getting better more quickly than anybody thought this time last year.
Even when politicians simply try and drum up support, they come across like a weird cult.
I just came to realise that if I believed in those principles and I supported what the Labour Party was doing, then I should really join up and play a part in trying to change things.
Yes, no matter how many zhuzhy modern TV techniques they employ to pass themselves off as normal people, politicians seem doomed to come across as snake oil salesmen or pricks. Maybe they could do with help from someone who really knows how TV works.
Somebody a bit like Simon Cowell.
Yes, entertainment deity Simon Cowell recently outlined his plan to redefine political TV in a revealing and ominous interview on the BBC's Heavyweight News Night.
You've said in the past that the X Factor could have other applications. What about some kind of political engagement for the X Factor?
Yeah, because it's the sort of thing I'd like to watch. There are so many really, really, really hot topics. And
like
I think,
what?
well, for instance, should we or should we be in Iraq and Afghanistan? If you actually asked most people in the country, why are we there? I couldn't even tell you.
I'd give Richard Madeley a ring if I were you. He's got a few theories.
Simon might like to know that an X Factor style political show has been tried before in the form of ITV's snazzy political bear pit Vote For Me, which had all the usual talent show ingredients: a shiny studio, a panel of expert judges, an eager amateur lineup and a phone vote, and which, to the channel's embarrassment, was won by extreme right-winger Rodney Hilton-Potts.
Thank you very much. Finally, candidate number one, Rodney, tell us one thing you care about. Your time starts now.
Our pensioners didn't fight 2 world wars to save this great country, to have it swamped with immigrants.
Vote For Me wasn't a hit, but then it didn't have a red telephone in the middle.
We would have a red telephone in the middle, which is at any time someone from number 10 can call in. But I think something like that would be a good way for me to get involved in politics in my own way, which is it would be controversial. The public would eventually make the decision.
You know,